Hi, I'm Jamie with the Bank Card Group. What I'm going to attempt to do today is take you through the life of a terminal. And what I mean from the life of a terminal is, let's start out with a terminal that was out when I was born. You may have come across these, you may have seen these. Very heavy printer, very old terminal. Up to today's terminals with today's technology. All of these terminals on the back row that you may see here, from the Hypercom unit to the Nerite unit to the Omni 3200 unit, are all old technology terminals. What does that mean? That means that they lack the ability to hold the encryption that's required by PCI compliance today, set by the card brands. Meaning that the technology in these terminals, or the software in these terminals, can be hacked or broken into. They just don't have the capacity to withhold the amount of memory that's required in today's technology or today's terminals. So we can move up to the terminals that we support today. We do support the FD100 as well as the VX570 and some other line of terminals. Let me stop here on the VX570 because I want to point something out that's very important. While we do support this terminal today for the VX570, this terminal is a terminal that does have some older technology in it, meaning that this terminal I could see becoming obsolete within the next year or two. So if I was a merchant or if I was a salesperson, I would not be necessarily selling this terminal today because very soon in the near future, within the next year or two, this terminal could also be very well obsolete. The main difference between the terminals on the front line and the terminals on the back line, besides PCI compliance, is all the terminals on the back line simply use a phone cord. All of the terminals on the front line can not only use a phone cord, but for a more secure way of running a transaction can use the Ethernet cable, which is very highly important, also increases the speed of the transaction. Also, all of these terminals on the front row can use EMV technology. What does that mean? EMV stands for Euro, MasterCard, and Visa. This is a technology that's been around for some years, primarily used outside of the United States. Recently, the United States has adopted this technology and made it required for businesses to be able to accept this technology by October of 2015. This technology has to be able to be accepted on all of these terminals in the front row. How do we use this technology? And I'll just pick out a terminal here. When I come into a merchant, instead of me swiping my credit card or handing my credit card to the business for them to be able to swipe my credit card, I'm simply going to insert my credit card into the front of the terminal, and then I'm going to run the transaction from there. What is this doing? Right now, what this is doing is this is actually reading the chip on the card versus the magnetic stripe, meaning it's way more encrypted than the stripe itself, much more secure. Again, for merchants in October of 2015, what this means is a liability shift. If you're not accepting 75% of these cards in your equipment, all the liability from these transactions, from the swipe transactions, you'll be responsible for. Along with these terminals as well, you'll see a couple different variations of terminals. And I'm going to talk about the differences between the two here and the two here. Both of these you can see are VX520 terminals. Both look very similar, very slick in design, very fast units. One thing that you'll notice underneath this terminal, both of these units, is this terminal has plenty of ports for today's technology as well as tomorrow's technology. But the difference between these two terminals, as you can see from the front of this terminal, you can see 4 green lights that would power on once lit up. What that means is I can simply pay by using my iPhone 6 or my Samsung Galaxy phone versus swiping my credit card. I can use that on this terminal as well as this terminal, and you can see the difference in the lights in the front of these terminals. Now I'm going to move on to these two terminals. Both of these terminals are meant to be used in a wireless environment. What does that mean? This terminal, for example, is the VX680. This terminal requires a cell phone signal. Yes, a cell phone signal. Not necessarily your cell phone, but keep in mind, if you're not getting a cell phone signal, meaning inside of a building, metal building for example, you're not going to have very many bars. You're not going to get very much signal. This terminal requires the same signal strength and or band strength. So you want to make sure when you're using this terminal is primarily used for outside where you have a high signal or cell phone strength. This terminal next to it is actually a Wi-Fi terminal. This terminal would be primarily used inside of a building or inside of an environment that has Wi-Fi access, that is encrypted Wi-Fi access. What does encrypted mean? Like I talked about in the terminals in the background versus the terminals in the front, encryption simply means that it needs to be PCI compliant, whereas nobody can hack into this terminal over that wireless network or that Wi-Fi network. Moving on to these two terminals, comparable to the Verifone terminals, basically meaning that this terminal can accept the smart card technology, which is the EMV technology that I referred to, And this terminal with the 4 lights can accept the NFC technology, which is, again, the iPhone 6 or Samsung Galaxy phone. Now I'll move on to the pin pads. This is a traditional pin pad that can be used across all of these terminals. This pin pad is simply for when I want to come in and use a debit card. I swipe my card, they ask for my PIN number, and I enter my PIN number. That's what this does, and that's all this does. This pin pad here, along with it being able to accept PIN debit, it's not required. However, you can accept PIN debit. But if I simply wanted to have a credit card terminal on my desk, or if I was a merchant that I want to have my credit card terminal, not so easy access to the customer, I would want to have this pin pad. This pin pad can be used with all the terminals in the front. What does this pin pad do? This pin pad combines the technology that you see in the front along with being able to accept the EMV technology, smart card technology, as well as NFC technology, as you can see the 4 lights in the front. So now I can pay by swiping my credit card, by inserting my credit card, or by paying with my NFC technology phone. The last and final thing that I'm going to show you today is for those individuals that are in the person-to-person type environment. What does person-to-person mean? This is your babysitters or this is your hairdressers, the people that really just have a few transactions here or there, 2 or 3 a day or something of that nature. This technology is not used for those merchants or for those businesses that want to take a high volume of transactions. This is really used for those individuals that aren't going to take a high volume of transactions, but it's very cost effective compared to these terminals that may be a few $100s compared to this that may be pennies on the dollar compared to these terminals. Again, we're going to demo these terminals a little bit later in other video clips, and you can see them in a little bit more detail. I thank you for joining us today.